events in Iraq and Syria is taking the headlines here in United States and the West and everywhere else. And the new phenomena of ISIS, the rising star now for the West. We have here somebody who is following the events. He is a Syrian native himself. Aboud Dandachi, the city of Homs, after living through the Syrian army, artillery, and tanks and assault in his neighborhood. December of 2013, you left for Istanbul. Is that
Yes.
correct?
I left Homs in February 2012. That's when the army came in, and I went to my home village of Telkarah. But there was a lot of fighting there as well. So I went to Tartus. So I spent 18 months in Tartus. In September 2013, I made the decision to leave Syria, and I left to come to Turkey.
And Turkey was the destination choice for what?
Yes.
Security reason, or you have a connection there?
I don't have any connections here. No, I don't know anybody here. I have a lot of relatives in Lebanon, but Lebanon is it's pretty unstable for a refugee. I mean, to be a refugee anywhere in the Middle East is a very tough and very uncertain future for anybody. But I didn't know anything about Turkey. I just took a chance. I had no idea what kind of reception I would receive when I came to Turkey. I just knew that they were accepting Syrians, so I thought I would try, because I spent 2 weeks in Lebanon catching up with relatives. But I know I know Lebanon's history. Even at the best of times, it's been a very security and stability has been an issue there.
How difficult it is to leave places of rape, civil war.
When I was in Tartus, I was living within 10 square kilometers where there was no war going on. We were safe in this bubble, this 10 square kilometers. Outside of it, there was a war going on. Of course, we would see the effects of the war. There were a lot of funerals, and there were a lot of posters for young men who had died serving in the army and serving in the security forces. And the war was always a constant presence. But inside Tartus itself, there were no checkpoints. People could pretty much live their life as they want. But there came a point where, I remember the day that I decided to leave. In the morning, I had no intention of leaving. It wasn't even on my mind. There was nothing to drive me to leave Syria. And I was, even though a lot of my relatives had left, a lot of my friends had left, I was determined not to. Because leaving Syria, when you leave Syria, you pretty much sure that you're not going to come back for a very long time. And you make a decision to either you're forced, or you make a decision to be a refugee. Being a refugee in the Middle East is not something to be taken lightly unless you're really, really forced to. Like there were people who were running for their lives. My home village, 90% of it has been displaced. My home village of Telkarah has been displaced. I was lucky. I had the luxury of staying in Tartus. But there came a point where things got so crazy in Syria with all these stories we were hearing about Daesh in Raqqa. This was in 2013, where they still weren't. The stories that were coming out, they still weren't they had not taken over Iraq. They had taken over Raqqa, but what they were doing in Raqqa was scary enough. And then Bashar al-Assad goes and uses chemical weapons in late August. When it was apparent that he was going to get away with it, he was not going to be held accountable for it. Well, I thought to myself, this guy could butcher as many people as he wants. There's nothing stopping him.
Mm-hmm.
Sometime in the afternoon of that day, I sort of kind of panicked, I think. I thought, what am I still doing here? They're going to shut the borders soon. These countries are not going to keep taking more Syrians. And because things were getting so bad, things weren't improving. They were getting worse. It was going to be inevitable that there were going to be more Syrians fleeing Syria. I thought, you know what? Better now than later. And that's what I did. I just made the decision. I just called up a driver that I knew, and he had me in Lebanon by evening.
They know what they're doing, these guys. These are the real hero there. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your life in Syria before.
Well, I had actually lived all my life outside of Syria. I was one of these people who had grown up in the Gulf. After I studied in Jordan, and after university, I went to work in the Gulf because if you want to get out of the army, you have to spend 5 years in the Gulf, then pay them $5,000 is what we call it, بدل عسكرية, so we don't have to serve in the army. And so I had to go to the Gulf if I didn't want to serve in the army. So I went there, and in 2010, I made a decision to move back to Syria. I wanted to put down roots because I lived in Jordan and Qatar and Saudi Arabia and Qatar and the Emirates and so many different cities, and I wanted to put down roots. I wanted to buy a house, establish some foundations, and because Homs was so close to my home village, I decided that would be Homs, and I bought a house in February 2011. So talk about bad timing. But I wanted for nothing. My house was in a very nice neighborhood, upper middle class, called Insha'at. It's right next to Bab Amr. And I wanted for nothing when the revolution started. I had my own house. I was engaged. I had my own my own business. I mean, for me personally, life was great.
This is wonderful. So, what is it like to be a refugee now? I know millions of refugees in Turkey, and I know you are in Istanbul, maybe a little bit further. But when we say refugee, I know this is from what I've heard, from what I read. I mean, they are the lucky one.
I am the lucky one. I got off relatively lightly. The worst that happened to me was that I lost my home. So what? Okay, it happens. This is what happens. I mean, all my brothers are safe and sound. Most of my extended family are outside Syria, and they managed to get away. Other people have lost a lot more. I'm physically well. I honestly, compared to what other people have lost, I have nothing to complain about. But I'm one of the lucky ones. I have an uncle who lost two sons. They were fighting in Turkey, and he lost two sons. I have another cousin also who died. He was the only son of another aunt. And the way that my extended family are living now in Lebanon, it's a huge difference from how they were living in Syria. In Syria, they owned lands, they owned their own houses, they owned their own businesses. Now they're over there, and to be a refugee in the Middle East is to be at the mercy of a bureaucracy, of a state, to be at the mercy of changing political circumstances. I mean, you can be sure. I mean, Turkey's hospitality, I could not have imagined or asked for a better reception than what I've gotten. I have been given the freedom to do whatever I want here, whatever I want. For the first, here in Turkey, I feel I have more rights and more dignity than the 6 Arab countries I lived in and worked in. No exaggeration.
That doesn't say much about what's going on in the Arab country. But
true, that's not a high standard.
Yeah, I know. But I know living a refugee life is not easy anywhere. I mean, let's be honest, in South America and everything. But you're right. I take my point. As somebody living in Istanbul, away from home, you feel vested in what's going on, but nothing you can do as far as the ground. So you are an activist. You are a keyboard jihadist.
Well, I wouldn't call myself a jihadist because the last time I went to a mosque was just to visit the Blue Mosque. So I'm not really. I lack the religious aspect to be a jihadi.
Well, jihadist is not religious anymore. There is a secular jihadist. There is a Jewish jihadist. There is, jihadist. Somebody dedicated to something. There is a. We cannot, as a journalist, as an activist, away from home, what you have left, you write, your publication, and your articles published in so many different publications. So how's it like to live the life in Istanbul?
Well, the Turks have been very generous in allowing me a space to do what I do. I mean, sometimes they've been very generous in publishing some of my writings. It's what I mean. There are so many people who are now opining and involved in punditry on issues in the Middle East. What drives me to write is that there are always different angles which people overlook. which people don't talk about, because it seems, I don't know what it is, but it seems that most of the mainstream media always have to follow the same angle. You always find them following the same angle at the same time. Like around this time last year, it was that the activists had all given up hope and they wanted to go back to the regime, etc., etc. Well, that wasn't true. Not all activists had given up. In any struggle, in any war, you're going to find people who give up. That's just natural. That's just what happens in a long, drawn out conflict. And 6 months ago, it was that Assad. The angle was that Assad was winning the war. He won the war. It's over. That was the angle 6 months ago. And now it's Daesh, Daesh, Daesh. I mean, like, it's. I mean, there are always angles which the mainstream media. Maybe it's for economic reasons, editorial policy. I don't know what it is, but inevitably, the mainstream media, the big outlets, will overlook very important angles, and that's what I try to do. That's what I try to do. I try to fill in the gaps. I try to address something that the mainstream media just doesn't have, maybe just doesn't have the time to shine a spotlight on.
Talk a little bit about, I know you wrote the last blog you have about Obama's speech and the strategy, ISIS strategy, which seems laughable to you. And you compare him to a used salesperson. I think you've been very generous with his last 10 suit. He looks like a used salesperson. Tell us a little bit about the premise of the last blog, and why would the head of the most powerful nation and superpower resort to a strategy that hasn't been working in Yemen and Afghanistan, and the mainstream media actually buying into it?
Barack Obama has been a huge disappointment, and that's putting it mildly. I compare him to George Bush Sr. in 1990. George Bush Sr. built this humongous coalition before a single bullet was fired in Desert Storm. I was in Saudi Arabia. I was a teenager when I was in Saudi Arabia when in the build-up to Desert Storm. Why did so many countries line up with America then, and now Obama can't get a single country to commit openly to him now? It comes down to credibility. Obama has no credibility. He has weaseled out of red lines and commitments, and he's made a habit of appeasing America's opponents and throwing America's allies under the bus. From Ukraine and America's allies in Lebanon, who have been getting killed by Hezbollah. Now, to be an American ally in Lebanon is a very thankless job right now. They're getting killed off. I mean, there are some Lebanese politicians who don't dare go back to Lebanon because Hezbollah have completely terrorized the atmosphere over there.